grip panels, I should say, take a 3/32. Now check this out with the ball ends. This is why I want you to get ball ends. You don't have to have it straight in there for it to come off, and you can really be quick when taking off screws. It just makes your life a little bit easier. And so, you know what else is a good idea? I don't have one of these, but I've seen a lot of guys use them at the field especially. They get a magnet pan or a magnet tray. This is a type of thing that's for the auto industry, but it's a small pan that has a magnet on the bottom that sticks to, you know, your tailgate or whatever. But anyway, when you put a screw in there, dink, it sticks to the bottom of that and doesn't let it go. And you can see how small some of these screws get. It's real easy to lose them on the field, and you know, you're screwed for the day in some cases. These are die sticky 3s. I don't think these are even still made. I run die sticky 2s or 3s on this gun. This is the slim frame by CCM. Let me show you the difference between a slim and a fat frame. I'll grab my 6.5 here while I'm talking. You can see the difference in size there. If you're a guy with meat hands, and I've got some pretty large hands, I run large gloves, you might want to go to a large frame. CCM sells both of them. If you don't mind that and you want the lightest gun possible, and I find this frame is pretty comfortable with me with the right grips on it, stay with the slim frame. It absolutely does weigh less. Not that a couple of grams is going to help my big self get to the 50 or something, but it's nice to run a lighter gun if that's what you're into. The next thing we're going to do is grab our 1/8 inch again, and this is where I was saying this comes in handy. This tool comes in handy at times. Slips right down in there and loosens up right away, and then gets past your grip frame here, because even with these shorter ones, sometimes you got to kind of come in at an angle to get that out. But again, that's where the ball end can really help you out. Either way, 2 screws. You only need to loosen these up a couple turns, and probably just 1 turn, and this will slide off. Okay, now what I was doing there, let me put it back on, is I loosened that up enough to get this auto trigger arm off of the pin. Now mine's a little shorter because I made my own pin, but if all you need to do is keep loosening this, and it's got to be a couple of turns at a time for each screw to get enough side-to-side play to get that auto trigger arm off the marker. And then what you want to do is pull the trigger as you slide this back, and that will, auto trigger's got to be in the right place, let this come off. Now if you try to take this off without pulling off the trigger, it wants to hang up. What's wrong? What's wrong? Just pull the trigger, and boom, that comes right off. We'll set the body aside for now. Now, as we look at this, the old auto triggers prior to the T2s and 6.5s, and just recently, didn't have a retention pin. This is the auto trigger retention pin. They had a ball on this side, ball and spring, and before that, they didn't have anything. So when you took this out, the auto trigger would just fall out. I love this addition. This really is some quality stuff here from CCM, because it keeps that auto trigger in, it keeps it aligned, it keeps everything lined up, okay? Now I have an older T2, so it has the auto trigger cam comes out this side. Now they're just recessing the inside, and it's a shorter cam, so you might not see this cam come through. Either way, and this can be a little tricky sometimes, but give it a couple of taps, and that pin that holds the auto trigger cam and arm in comes right off. So where'd that come from? It came from here. Do not lose this pin. Of course you can get another one from CCM, but you lose it, and it's easy to lose, and you might be screwed. All right, so we've got this apart here to this point, and all we've got really left is the trigger and the sear. So this is the sear retention pin, and the only thing that's holding that in its normal configuration is the grips. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is simply push that out carefully. It falls out the other side, and the sear comes out. Turn it upside down, and the sear return spring comes out. Okay, what that leaves us with is just the trigger. Now, I advise don't take the trigger out unless you get shot in the trigger, or you're like me and you're anal and you just like to make sure everything is perfectly running at all times. Leave it alone. And here's why. This shoulder bolt that has to go back in here, although they've changed this up now to make it a lot easier as well, but if you have an older CCM or a Series 6 or anything like that, this shoulder bolt needs to be set right. If you over tighten it, the trigger won't have good play in it. They changed that up now to another drop pin. Again, love it, but that's different. 1/8 inch Allen key, a couple of turns, that comes out, and then the trigger just slides right out. You have an empty trigger frame bar, one set screw, which is right here. This set screw is for setting the under travel, which I'll show you that when we put it all back together. But yeah, so that is the trigger frame and its component parts, very easily broken down. And now we'll just simply put it back together. Now, one thing I didn't cover when cleaning a lot of my gear is some sort of, what do you clean it with? I use a lot of water, mostly water, a little bit of alcohol, not on your goggles, remember, a little bit of alcohol, and a couple drops of soap in a spray bottle. And this is just an old Nick Wax bottle that I use. I have a WD-40 bottle that I use, doesn't matter. I just wipe everything down. And I didn't get shot in here, so I'm not going to mess with this. But Q-tips, another thing that would be great to have is Q-tips, in particular long-handled Q-tips, and you can get those at medical supply places, are wonderful to have to get down there. If you get shot in there, get it completely cleaned out. Hose it out with your spray bottle, really get at it, and clean out in there and let it dry, okay? And then that will help your trigger get cleaned up. If you're getting a gritty trigger pull, check this as you pull it out. If it's marred, scarred, anything is wrong there on the sides of this, and you see that mine is clean, you've got grit in here, grime, usually pulled in by lubrication, over lubrication, or paint. Get that cleaned out. The CCM is a racehorse. It's meant to run fast, and if you've got a messy gun, it's just not. It's not going to run as fast as it could. So, trigger slides in. You want to put the trigger in first. It slides in right from the top. Okay, it slides in. You want to line those holes up there to allow this shoulder bolt to go back in. Grab your 1/8 and tighten it down. Now, let me show you what happens when you over tighten. In some cases, if you over tighten this shoulder bolt on any of the old CCM markers, that will cause the trigger to not be as smooth as it could. This is where blue Loctite really comes in handy. And what I do is I get really close to having this thing tightened down. I put a drop of blue Loctite on this side of the threads, which again is just going to seal the threads, just give it a little sticky. And then I tighten it down just barely finger tight. Boom, done. And then I check it. I want to make sure that that is falling freely without any assistance. That I know is a good trigger. Okay? Spring goes in next. You see a little chamfered out area or drilled out area for the spring to go in. Put it in there. Hold on to it. Okay? Because you turn it down, it might fall back out. So hold on to it. Put the sear in. This is where you wish you had more than one hand, because what happens now is you've got the spring that wants to push up on the sear. And what you need to do is line up this hole with the hole that the sear has, and then drop this pin in. And sometimes that can be tricky, like right now. So keep fuddling with it, but you'll get it. Now check that out. Snappy trigger. That little spring is now pushing back in place and resetting that trigger every time. If you want to, drop a tri-flow down here. Wouldn't hurt anybody. I usually put one drop and then dry off the excess right where the trigger roller engages the sear. Not necessary, one of my little quirks, but that's just what I do. With that said, too, one of my little quirks, one of the things I also do, and let me take this sear back out, is I polish two parts on the sear. And what I do is I take a bench grinder that has a buffing wheel on it, and I clean up. See how shiny that is? I clean up using a 2000 grit sandpaper, the top part and the back. CCM sends it very polished too. And this part here, this part contacts the trigger. This part catches the hammer. That polish gets the snappiest release. So I make sure that that thing is just super clean every time I do it. Take it apart, which is, you know, every 3 months or something, or unless I get shot in the gun, which never happens because I never get shot. It's real easy to not get shot when you stay in the dead box and cry. Okay, so one of my secret strategies. AT, auto trigger cam, and arm. No reason to take that apart. That's Loctited together. They're a little bit different now, but the older ones had pins. The newer ones are have a recess. Again, no reason to take it apart unless you had a serious mess. You'd have to have a real serious mess to take that apart. And it's been Loctited, so I wouldn't mess with it. Take that apart. Drop the pin back in. Just make sure it seats properly, and don't turn it upside down and let it fall out from here on out. That's back together, and you can see that oil keeps coming out into the trigger. So, you know, I always make sure that I'm not over lubricating, because any lubrication on there that is extra just attracts dirt. Slide the grip frames back on. CCM, let me grab those real quick. CCM sends theirs with nylon grip panels, which are great. They're just 45, made for the 1911, you know, 45 handled grip panels, but you can see how really thin that is. And let me grab that 6.5 again. You can see how really thin that is with that on in comparison to the fat frame. Again, it's all a matter of preference. First thing I do is I take these off, just because, again, my hands, and I put on a die 3. Now that I've run a die 3 on my T2 for as long as I have, you see how it's adding a little fatness there, as opposed to just one length of this Delrin plate, and probably 1/8 of an inch there, and you're getting some in the back, and you're getting some in the front. Just adds a little more grip on that trigger, and doesn't add much weight. Not that Delrin is all that heavy, but you know. Tighten these down, just snug them down. No reason to reef on these. They hold right into place without getting silly. Make sure you do line these up, especially if you're using die stickies. They quite often want to kind of fight you a little bit. Make sure you're not marring it or cross-threading. Stainless steel pins is going into aluminum here, and aluminum will lose, meaning it will strip it out if you're not careful. And the problem with that is the stainless steel screws are way cheaper than the grip frame is, so you'll have to send that off to get helicoiled if you strip it out, and it's just not cheap. So take your time. Put these screws back in. Get in there, you. There we go. And then ASA goes back on. Now, here's one cool thing about these grip frames. Do you remember these holes? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. That's just to allow you a little bit more adjustment of where to put your ASA. If you've got longer arms, you're going to want to put your ASA back here. Okay. If you're shorter, got T-Rex arms, you're going to want to put it up here just to drop your tank forward. I kind of shoot the middle on this particular gun, although most of them, I give it a little bit more because I'm 6'5", so I've got longer arms. So I need a little bit more from my tank to feel comfortable. I run a 45-45 Crossfire tank. That's just me. I used to be sponsored by Crossfire, and they've always been good to me. I've never had trouble with their stuff, and I know how to tech their gear, so I don't worry about it. These 2 screws go back in, and that's it for the grip frame. The grip frame is now reassembled and is ready to go. So on the next thing we'll do is we'll break down the top tube of the marker, then we'll move into the bottom tube. See you then.